Good evening, everybody. And we are in the mode of preparing for the High Holy Days. We had Slichot on Saturday evening, and perhaps some of you had the opportunity to attend a Slichot evening. We had a fabulous one at my community. I got great feedback. I was feeling really good yesterday. They told me it was like my best one yet. So that made me feel good. And it's wonderful to be able to share this opportunity to prepare, really to prepare to turn our hearts and to prepare to go forward in new directions, perhaps for many of us. So slichot are prayers of penitence or penitential prayers, if you call them that. And we're going to study a particular prayer this evening and actually pull the prayer apart and look at some of the key verses of this particular prayer and a little bit about how it came to be and why it is such a controversial piece of liturgy. So we're going to study the prayer Yigdal, and I'm sure many of you have heard it and have heard it sung. And it is, I'd like to give you a little bit of background on the prayer in case you're not familiar with it. Yigdal was written by Maimonides, the Rambam, Moses ben Maimon. He lived from the early 1100s to the early 1200s, 1138 to 1204. He was Sephardi. I'm going to give you a little bit of his background and then we'll play his song. Is that okay, Nina?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Okay. He was Sephardi. He was born in Cordoba, and he was a doctor by profession. And he worked in Morocco and in Egypt. In fact, he was head of the Jewish community in Egypt. And he served at the court of Saladin, the Emperor Saladin. He was an astronomer. He was a philosopher. And he was very controversial. His most famous work was the Mishneh Torah. And he was controversial because of what we're going to study tonight. And I think, Nina, if you can play it and then I'll talk a little bit about it and then we'll go on to the questions.
Sounds good.
יגדל אלוהים חי וישתבח, נמצא ואין עת אל מציאותו, אחד ואין יחיד כייחודו, נעלם וגם אין סוף לאחדותו. אין לו דמות הגוף ואינו גוף, לא נערוך אליו קדושתו, קדמון לכל דבר אשר נברא, ראשון ואין ראשית לראשיתו. הינו אדון עולם לכל נוצר, יורד גדולתו ומלכותו, שפע נבואתו נתנו אל אנשי סגולתו ותפארתו. לא קם בישראל כמו שעוד נביא ומביט את תמונתו, תורת אמת נתן לעמו אל, על יד נביאו נאמן ביתו. חליפה אין ולא ימיר דתו,
So I hope you enjoyed that. Nina actually picked out this arrangement that we listened to, and kudos to you. I think it was really it was very spirited, and Yigdal is a very spirited, traditional melody, like on a good day, if you're in a congregation that sings it, and I really love it. It's a song. It's done at the end of Shabbat evening services, so on Kabbalat Shabbat on the Friday evening. It's at the and it's a poetic adaptation of the 13 principles of faith that Maimonides came up with. And because of what he put in his 13 principles of faith, or 13 attributes of faith, it's also called, he was considered a very controversial person. He the song talks about the sort of, believe it or not, it's a chronological, I guess, belief system of Judaism. And the reason I'm like hesitating as I'm talking about it is every year I'm a guest speaker at the local Methodist seminary. And I go in and they ask me to come in and teach about Judaism in the world religions class. I've been doing this for like 6 years already. And I bring tucked into my packet of handouts for these students. Many of them happen to be Korean, so they don't even, English isn't even their first language. It's hard enough, when it's not. And I bring a copy of the 13 Principles of Faith, the Yigdal, and I say to them, you can read this and you can really learn a lot about what the background and basic beliefs of Judaism are. So it's a chronological summary of Judaism following the order of the original 13 principles that Maimonides put together. This song follows that format or outline. And so Maimonides boils down the essential teachings of Judaism to these lines in the song. And so we know that, and he argued that anyone who couldn't stand by all of these principles in their absolute form without any sort of moving around or eliminating one or the other was considered a heretic. So he was very strong in his speaking, and he was very, he was a very high profile personage in the Jewish faith. So it was extremely challenging who he was in terms of what he was espousing. So now that you're familiar with the 13 principles of faith, if you were sort of bopping along and listening, the question is, are we good with slide 2, or I've lost numberings? We're okay. I wanted to ask if you would accept everything that's written in the 13 principles of faith. And, I'm going to read, let's see, here we go. Okay. Okay. What I wanted to do is read the English of all of these, just so that you can hear them flow. So let me take a minute to do that. Acclaim and praise the living God who exists beyond the boundaries of time. Most singular of all, concealed and yet also without bound or without boundaries. And we're going to be focusing on certain of the verses. So he has no body, excuse the gendering, nor not even the appearance of a body. It is impossible to measure God's holiness. Okay, we're just going to, prior to everything that was created, first of all, and yet himself without a beginning. Okay. Behold the matter of the world. Every creature is in awe of God's greatness and God's sovereignty. An abundance of prophetic inspiration was given to the people who are God's treasure and glory. In Israel, there never arose another prophet like Moses, able to see God's likeness. God gave a true Torah to his people through the hand of his prophet trusted in his house. God will never alter the divine law or exchange it for another forever and ever. God sees and knows our secret thoughts and foresees their consequences from the very beginning. God repays each righteous person for his actions and punishes the wicked in proportion to their wickedness. at the end of time, God will send the Messiah to redeem those who wait for his salvation. God will revive the dead in his full kindness, and may his name be blessed and praised forever. So if you're singing along on a Friday evening at Kabbalat Shabbat, and you may not know what you're singing now, you know how this parses itself out. The question is, do you think you need to accept all that is written in the Yigdal? How do you feel? Audrey?
I think the one that I don't wish to agree with is God's law is never going to change. And it just made me think, and I'm reading a book called The Unorthodox Wife or The Orthodox Wife or something like that right now. And it made me think of the Hasidic communities and like New Square in Spring Valley, New York.
Yes.
They're still living in the 17th and 18th centuries.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that that's necessarily the right way to live, not for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think God would want us to be comfortable. And I do think God allows us freedom. And since we have free will, he allows us the freedom to say, I don't choose to follow that law.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I was thinking. It's the one that struck me about that.
Thank you. And Bamaya wrote in the chat that she's good with 1 through 10, but the last 3, not so much. Other people, what is your reaction? Could you, can you take it in as it is and accept it? And, are you good with it? Or are there parts, to which you take exception? Julia, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's not that I take exception because I think that would be disrespectful to the tradition. But I think how many 8 centuries have elapsed. We know a lot more about the universe, about the planet, about the universe, about life. And so I think it comes from a 12th century point of view. And I'm not a 12th century person. And I have recently read a translation of Psalm 27. I'm not sure if it was a translation by Rabbi Yael Levy, but she posted it on her website. Every time it says God, she replaces it with divine presence. And so for me, it's more, I can be feeling more comfortable with the Yigdal the way it was written by substituting divine presence. And I feel that's not disrespectful, but it allows me to make it part of the era in which I live.
Thank you very much for sharing that. Do others have any thoughts on the Yigdal in its total form?
I missed the first one. Would you mind to show it again, please?
Sure, the first slide, can we go back? Yeah.
The first in the part of the 13, the
Sure,
first one.
sure.
Yes, and also if you look at the PowerPoint, we did replace, I did when I did it, I replaced it and made it as gender proof as possible. I think I missed one, but I'm happy to show it again. And just
Yeah.
let me know if you want me to keep going. Do you want to go through all of them again, or
do people need to see them again? We can go through them. Yes, we were asked to do it again.
okay?
Most singular of all, concealed and yet also without bound. God has no body, nor even the appearance of a body. It is impossible to measure God's holiness. Prior to everything that was created, first of all, and yet without a beginning. Behold, the sovereign of the world, every creature is in awe of God's greatness and God's sovereignty.
That's the one I missed.
Yeah, I'm just gonna, an abundance of prophetic inspiration was given to the people who are God's divine treasure and glory. In Israel, there never arose another prophet like Moshe, able to see God's likeness. God will never alter the divine law or exchange it for another forever and ever. God will never, God sees and knows our secret thoughts and foresees their consequences from the very beginning. God repays each righteous person for their actions and punishes the wicked in proportion to their wickedness. At the end of time, God will send the Mashiach, the Messiah, to redeem those who wait for salvation. God will revive the dead in God's full kindness. May God's name be blessed and praised forever. So we ran through them again. And, someone also wrote in the chat that there are other versions of the languaging of this. And yes, there certainly are. You can find them all over. You just need to go to Google, where divine source will be, God will be, eternal source of blessing, divine source. Yah for God is very popular now. And we have a question in the chat that I want to refer to, and then Audrey, I'll come to you. It was the one about reviving the dead. I lost the chat, just moved, and now I can't. Revive the dead, ? Revive the dead, period. No question mark. That's definitely what it says. So I don't know if anyone wants to comment on that one before I recognize Audrey, who had her hand up. But that's what it says. Go ahead, Audrey.
Okay. And one of the ones I'm looking at, because they're all over the place, I spoke about God's law being eternal, never changing, and that
Yeah.
and then Julie said she didn't want to be disrespectful. And then I said, oh my God, I was disrespectful. That was terrible. So I didn't mean to be disrespectful either, but I like it the way it says it on this one. It says, there will be no other Torah. I like that.
What's your source, Audrey? Is the source cited?
I'm a techno idiot, so no.
Okay, I'm wondering if it came from a more liberal source than a more traditional source.
It doesn't say where it's from. Sorry, I'll try to find it though.
But if you look at something like God's law being absolute and never changing, and you look at, different processes in Judaism throughout, there have been, I don't want to call it updates, but there have been responses that have come out that have changed and updated certain things that we consider, pretty much accept, the things that we accept and we do. Just, such as riding on the Sabbath, or, things like that. Healing on Shabbat, which was a big thing dating back to, the first century when Jesus was challenging the leaders of the Jewish people. So, and there's a question in the box. It says, I didn't know Judaism believes in reviving the dead. I thought that was a Christian belief. Judaism believes in reviving the dead. That's one of the beliefs it has. And, there's a lot of information. You just have to Google that. I happen to know, because I just finished teaching something about it, that there's source material there that you can go back and you can pull out. A lot of the language in more Reform Siddurim, that verse is changed to the deadened. Okay, God will revive or raise the deadened, deadened, which gives an option to, if you are spiritually deadened, or you're not, you're not awake, then that verse goes toward that piece of text. So there's a lot out there. And yes, gotcha. Anybody else have, Julia, back to you. Wait, you're muted.
I'm looking at myjewishlearning.com, and they list the principles with, I guess you would call them disagreements from medieval scholars, so scholars of his time. And they're very interesting. And for me personally, they make it more embraceable. I'll just give one example because, hang on, one example. Oh, I'm sorry here. Oh, the leaders of Babylonian Jewry from the 7th to the 11th centuries defended the use of angels to intercede with God. He added that angels could sometimes fulfill the petitions of a prayer without consulting God, which I happen to like a lot. But so there's some very nice commentaries from his contemporaries on ways you could, it's not so much, in the tradition of Jewish commentary.
And it's good to look at the other opinions in addition to what we have. I taught a summer course on the Jewish philosophers, and Maimonides was like, my age group of people was all seniors. So everyone was like 60 and older. And I had some people were 100 years old in my class. And we had like the most interesting discussion on Maimonides that you could have and it was the same. It could have been a contemporary discussion, just like what we're having here, because it was looking at the same things and disputing them and questioning them even then. I just want to go on maybe a little bit because I want to make sure do we have other people who didn't have an opportunity to speak who would like to express any thoughts about the different tenets that are listed in Yigdal? Anybody that we skipped over? Eddie, please.
I just thought about Harambam, Maimonides, that since he was a philosopher, an astronomer, and a doctor, and he might know that the people, I don't know if the people in his time were not doing much about Judaism or influenced by other religions that they were living around. And maybe that's why he was tougher. And he knew that the human being can't fulfill all 13, but he thought he will give some guidelines that are very tough, and maybe the Jews will do a little bit out of it.
That they would aspire to live up to that. Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting way to look at it, because he's certainly, being a philosopher and a doctor and working in the court of Saladin, he was exposed to everybody. He really had a sense of, I think, what was going on in his universe, at the time.
I think he was a much open-minded, or at least worldwide knowledge, than those who sit in the Rabbanut in Israel today and decide not to do that or do that. I had to wait 14 years for my get. So I don't know, if I would go to the Rambam, maybe he would help me better.
I hear you. I hear you. So should we try the next slide, Nina? Let's look at the next one. Let's see what we've got here. Okay, whoops. Is it this one, most singular of all, concealed and yet also without bound?
I don't know if the translation is so accurate.
Wait, hold on, Nina, are we on the right slide?
Which do you want to, we've been skipping around. So what
Oh, okay. All right, that's fine. Well, I think we can stay with this one for now. I mean, why not?
We have some that we were particularly finding interesting and controversial. So maybe
we pulled out, we had targeted
like this one.
Certain ones. We had 12 targeted was next.
Did we do 10?
Did we do 10? Not yet.
We did not. I think that if we're going in order,
okay.
a good one.
Okay, so this one, and hold your thought on the translation, Eddie, that was you, right? That said that you were talking about the translation. But look at this one. God sees and knows our secret thoughts and foresees their consequences from the very beginning. Well, I'm wondering what that feels like to people. Is that settling? Does it make you feel secure and settled? Or does it make you feel concerned about your freedom? I see Audrey's hand. I see Julia's hand. Anybody else have a hand up that I'm missing? Okay, go ahead, Audrey, and then Julia.
It is very unsettling to me because if God knows what you're thinking and he sees the consequences at the end of the line, why didn't he smite Hitler? And that was what occurred to me when I read that.
Mhm.
And, you know, I've always thought, well, God gives us free will. Hitler did very bad things with his free will.
Mhm.
But if God knew it was going to happen. So I can't reconcile that was okay with God.
Mhm.
I used to believe, I really did believe God's will. God's will. And I had this discussion with a rabbi. He was talking one Yom Kippur about I can't think of the right word, the Akedah, the binding of Isaac. And why did Abraham listen? Why did Abraham do what God said? And I said, because it was God's will that he was going to do this and he had to listen. And he said, if God told you to bind your kid, would you do it? I said, no. You know, so I kind of started questioning then about God's will.
Mhm.
And this is a continuation of it.
Mhm.
It is very unsettling for me.
Thank you. Before I go to the next one, Stephanie has her hand up for the first time. She hasn't spoken, so I'd like to give her an opportunity.
I kind of thought the same way as Audrey, but in thinking about Judaism, I think that one of the things that I hear a lot is it's not the death of sinners that God seeks, but up until the last moment, he's hoping that they redeem themselves, that they make a different choice. So although he sees the consequence, I think there's always the hope that, you know what, you can still make a different choice. You're going down the wrong road, the bad path, but you can still make a choice to say, no, that's wrong. I can make a different choice. I can go down a different path. And that is the free will that we have. So that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, you can turn until the gates close, if you want to put it in a metaphor of this time of the year. I mean, thank you, Stephanie. Julia, and then Eddie. And I think, is there anyone else I try to write the names down when people raise their hands so I don't get them out of sequence. So please, Julia.
Nina, would it be possible to post that 10 again? It's been a while.
Yeah.
I had something I want to make sure God sees and knows our secret thoughts and foresees their comes. Okay, so the way I interpret that for myself is this refers to God within me, that God is within everybody. I don't want to make the separation like, father figure is looking down and directing. I'm not a puppet. I see this as talking about, I can see with the God in me, with the Godness in me, I can see the ramifications of my actions. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Oh,
And
yeah.
also to do with things like forgiveness, which is where we are right now.
Thank you. Beautiful. Etty, please. And then I think there was I don't know whether anyone else had a hand up after.
No, I can skip it. Thank you.
No, you're good. There's nobody else. You're okay. Did you want to?
I was just talking about the previous one about the English translation. And I think when you look at the Hebrew, you might look at it a little different.
Nina, do we want to go back and take a look at that? Do we have time to look at that one?
Yeah. Why not?
I can't remember what number was it that I noticed that the translation wasn't exactly the way I would translate it.
I think she doesn't mean this one. I think it was a different one. I don't remember which one it was.
Do you want me to go through them again?
I don't remember. I think maybe it was 2. It was in the beginning. I can't remember. Oh, that's the one.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the one. Because when I read it in Hebrew, Echad ve'en yachid keyichudo, I would never, I mean, I'm not so good in English, so I can't say anything about the English level. But if I had to translate it, most singular of all, this is almost like the Shema that we say.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
Shema,
Yeah,
he's one. That's it.
yeah,
And Ne'elam is also mysterious, not just that we can't find him. So if you think about the mysterious that we can't really understand, the human being can't really understand all the ways that God
nice.
acts,
Yeah.
then it makes a little bit more sense than concealed.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just thinking when you mention that, even the Shema, we say in my community we say Echad, Yachid, Yuchad, and then we go
Right.
through the prayer.
So you emphasize the uniqueness and that there is only one. There is no other.
Yeah, the singularity. Yeah. Thank you very much. So talking about free will on that last one that we were talking about, where God sees inside and knows everything, what does that mean then about free will? I wanted to ask that question. Then is there free will, or is there free will as we would define free will? And, where does free will fit into this? It's a big deal. We're told we were created with, the breath of life was breathed into us, and that breath, free will, was breathed in along with the breath of life. So
I think we are free to decide if we have the free will.
How we're going to use it, maybe. How we're going to use it. Nice. Yeah. We have, let's see, a slide. Mine says slide 14, but I don't know if it's verse 4. I don't know what.
Here, hold on.
Yeah.
We talked about this. How are we measured here?
Okay. Okay. So this is another controversial one. Bamaya, I'm thinking of you when you said 1 through 10 work, but 11 you started to not be happy. And, God repays each righteous person for their actions and punishes the wicked in proportion to their wickedness. This is a problem. I mean, there's a similar consequences paragraph in the Shema, as part of the Shema and the V'ahavta prayer, all about the consequences. We just had the Parsha for this week that talks about choose blessings and not curses, so that, your life will go in the right direction. But Maya, go for it. You've been waiting for a while for this one to come up. Go ahead.
Well, I just particularly dislike this because I don't find it to be true. Just not in like general practice of living. And so I feel like maybe this feels more proverbial, like generally true. But it's one of those things that, I mean, I feel like this, even though it's like traditionally our beliefs or something, it's not Torah to me. And so like even sometimes when we come across things, especially like proverbs or the promises, right? Oh, like nobody's ever gonna be barren. I mean, that's like the story of every woman that's a matriarch, until they have the child finally. But I feel like a lot of that is really hurtful. And if we're really waiting for people to be recompensed for their behavior, why do good things happen to bad people? Like, that's not a book title for no reason. And like, even when somebody mentions, like the Shoah, do I feel like, somebody who's murdered 6 million people and then acts like a coward and offs himself, is that even? Is that repaid for your evil doing? or does this only count for people who are believers in Allah? It makes no sense to me.
Please mute, folks. Thank you.
That was probably the one of the worst ones. And it very much kind of dovetailed into people who are having problems with 10, like, because if God can see everything that you're about to do or going to do, but doesn't do anything to like mitigate that, then what is the point of the punishment, right? Like, I feel like sometimes you get what you deserve and sometimes you get away with it, and maybe there might be some sort of at the end that's like not a thing that we know about necessarily that might even out the universe, but I don't think that it's a guarantee that that's going to be the thing that happens. And also, like, who's to judge, right? Like, if somebody passes away, there's a whole lot of people that feel like, hey, he didn't do enough, right? Like 6 million, he shouldn't have stopped. But most sane people would say, wow, that is some evil. I just don't see that playing out in real life. So it's hard for me to accept that as a tenet.
Okay. Thank you. And Julia?
Etty, did you want to say something?
Yeah, whichever. I mean,
Etty had a hand and then the hand went down.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, Etty, go ahead, and then Julia can go.
I would add to that it's a whole I don't remember the English word of Kohelet. That's the book of Kohelet. He's talking about why a good person ended up with bad stuff. That's a very philosophical question, one of the big philosophical questions in life. And if we mention the Shoah, my aunt walked in Paris street. She was a young woman with her baby, 7 months old, was taken and murdered in Auschwitz. So I'm sure she didn't do anything wrong to deserve this kind of end, not her and not the baby. So these are the things about Shoah that I think are unexplainable. And it's hard to forgive, and I'm not the one to forgive about the Shoah, but in everyday life, we see that good people end up with cancer and die, and very bad people that do very harm to humanity, they become richer and richer. And I don't want to go to politics, but some of them are there, up there.
So there's a factor of randomness also. I mean, that just like strikes, it just occurs. Julia, you wanted to speak to.
Well, yeah, I think that statement is not only false, but it is counter what we experience.
Mm-hmm.
It's counter to what we experience in life. And so what I feel it's infantilizing. It's treating us like children. You may see good people getting punished and you may see evil people getting not punished, but it's actually not happening. And I see it as some kind of almost political tool to keep people in submission to the way things are. You know what I mean?
Keeps the status quo. And
yeah, because we're not stupid. We can see this. Anyway, sorry, that was rather argumentative.
That was passionate. That's okay. Stephanie and then Audrey, go ahead.
When I met my husband, my mother-in-law had paid for a class for us. And at the time, it was a basic Judaism class. And at the time, I was going through a little bit of a crisis of faith and God. And I had studied abroad a semester, and we had gone to Poland, and we had visited Auschwitz. We had gone to Poland, and the Russians had just admitted that they had killed 15,000 Polish soldiers in the Bolsheviks in Cadian Forest. I may not be pronouncing that right. It was a very solemn display that they finally admitted it, and the Polish people were able to recognize the soldiers that had been killed. And I came back and took this basic Judaism class, and I said to the rabbi, I said, all this awfulness, Auschwitz and 6 million people, I couldn't get it over 15,000, let alone 6 million. You know, where was God? And his response back to me was, well, where was man? And I think that comes along with our free will, our choices. You know, a whole lot of people made a whole lot of bad choices at the time. And that particular phrase that everybody's having a problem with doesn't, I don't see it as a particularly evil phrase. I find we don't know, because we don't know what happens to everybody in the world everywhere. We don't know if they get punished or if they get rewarded. You can't know. You have to have faith. I happen to have faith that when I do good deeds, they make me feel better selfishly, but also that I think that is working towards a better life for myself, for my family, for my community, for the world. And I also think that people who put out, you know, bad vibes, make bad choices, steal things off your porch, your Amazon packages, and do worse things, I do have a belief that somewhere along the line, they are going to regret having made those choices. What sort of punishment that takes, I don't know. I am not the judge and jury of the human race, but I do feel that I feel that if you do bad things are going to happen to you eventually. It may not be today, it may not be tomorrow, but because, you know, my neighbor does something bad, I'm not going to do something bad back to my neighbor. I am still going to live by how I feel, what is right, and again, try and make the community a better place.
And if your neighbor does something bad to you, something bad may indeed occur to your neighbor, but it may not be in the time you see it. And it may not be, you know, like a direct consequence. It may come up further down the line. It may impact that neighbor's children after you're long moved out of the neighborhood. We don't know. Audrey, where are you? You were just moved on my screen. Go ahead. Thank you,
I was
Stephanie.
going to speak to what I believe it was Etty, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was Julia. Julia said that it sounded like we were being infantilized. And I agree with her. And I think that, you know, you have to look at the times that were when people began religion. I guess it was superstition. Nobody knew anything. The things that we know now, not that we know much about superpowers anyway, but it reminded me of Marx's statement. And I don't know if he said Christianity or religion, but it was either Christianity or religion is the something of the masses. And of course, now the word has this opiate, is the opiate of the masses. And of course, now that's what I was thinking of. And I'm glad I could remember it, because it took me a while to remember while Stephanie was talking. But I agreed with everything Stephanie said too. I really do.
Thank you. Let's take Julia's comment, and then let's go to the next piece.
I think this is why heaven and hell were invented. I mean, I know it's not as important in Judaism, but it's super important in Christianity and Islam, and also in a way for Buddhism, because they're different hell realms. There are various hell realms. So, okay, you're not getting your just desserts in this world, you'll get it in the next. So to me, that's a very convenient, convenient invention.
Thank you. Nina, let's go to the next one, I think, just in the interest of time.
Okie doke.
At the end of time, God will send the Messiah to redeem those who wait for salvation. Okay, at the end of time, what is that? What does that look like? when you imagine it, at the end of time, God's going to send the Messiah and so on and so forth, the rest of the statement. But what does the end of time look like? Can you imagine what that would be? Stephanie, what would it be like?
You know what? I have no idea, but if a Messiah comes, is anybody going to believe he's actually the Messiah, or will it be,
That's an issue. Yeah.
500 years down the road when we said, "Oh, that was the Messiah. We should have listened." That's all.
Yeah, no, I mean, the false prophets that lived in, in the past, we didn't know they were false prophets until their prophecy didn't come true, and then they were labeled false prophets. Lisa?
You muted.
Whoops. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, we're always saying Mashiach made the Messiah come in our day, et cetera, et cetera. So does that mean that we're asking for time to end? Put us out of our misery, all this, angels and devils and hell and Hitlers and all that. Because I've never really thought of it in that way. That's the way this is saying that time will end. So in other words, are we just saying, please get it over with as soon as we can? Or are we going to be waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting, and we'll already be dead? And that's why they have the dead rise back up, quote, quote, so that they can be part of that end of time and the Messiah coming. I don't know. I just never thought of it that way before.
So the Messiah is coming. Do we have any hand in that? Can we move that along, I guess is a better way to say it. And, what would we need to do in order to make that happen? The Messiah or the Messianic era, if you want to sort of, liberalize it a little. But Maya, go ahead.
Sorry.
Oh, wait, Lisa still talking. Lisa, did we not let you finish? I'm so sorry.
I was just, when you just said that, we always say that doing mitzvah is going to help bring the Messiah here. So go ahead, Bamaya. I just hadn't unmuted yet.
Okay, go ahead, Bamaya.
I guess when I think about this, like we're supposed to sort of like welcome Elijah in a way, like however he shows up, so that like when and that's how he will know. That's how he'll know to bring the Messiah to us, right? At least that's my understanding. And I also read a statement somewhere that somebody said something like, like if you don't believe in the Messiah, you're a heretic. But if the Messiah actually comes and you believe that that's him, then you're a heretic too, right? Like, and that feels very, very resonant to me because, wow, I think that I'm just not going to be the one that believes it. Like I hope if like he's got to like physically go around to people, it's like way late in the tour when he gets to be, because I'm just not buying it in any way. It's not that I don't believe that it's a thing that could happen. I just don't see time ending. So I don't necessarily see us ever showing up with Mashiach because you know what I mean? Like, I feel like Christianity definitely has that reserved space for their end time situation, but like, I don't see that being such a thing for us, right? And so when we're looking at like verses in Isaiah, or we're looking at any of the beliefs that we have around Elijah, and when we know that we're ready for a Mashiach, I just feel like maybe that's not a thing that's going to happen. And also like the end of time, like you were saying, like, what does that even mean? Or what does it look like? One of my issues with other faiths is that they have this like the whole world's gonna be destroyed thing. But back in Torah, God said, wait, you guys are wicked since birth. I'm not tearing up any more of my stuff because you don't know how to behave. Like I did that with the flood, it didn't work, and I'm over it, right? Like you want to destroy yourselves, go ahead. Like my stuff is fine. Which makes sense to me. The world actually does like self-heal itself as soon as we back off of it. right? We saw that in COVID. So I don't see the world ending necessarily. I think humanity might do itself in, but the world will be fine. So the end of time is just not a thing that I can conceive of, actually.
The earth will heal itself when we stop abusing it and back off of it. And it's interesting because with the flood, I was just teaching on the flood this morning, and one of the pieces of text that we studied was that God, in putting the flood, in having the flood come, was considering the idea of reversing creation and wiping it all out to start all over again. So, there would then need to be an end if God was wiping something out in order to start it again, there would have to be an end point so that there could be a beginning point. But I don't know whether so much that Judaism thinks about just life as being cyclical, for human life, certainly we're born, we die, we, go on. I mean, but how the world in the end of time, what does that mean? That Mashiach will come, and the dead will be revived. I mean, that's a pretty heavy belief system to leave your people with. I mean, if you think about it, very, very challenging.
Is that it's problematic because it seems like just really size wise, it just does not seem like that's a thing that can fit. I mean, if we're talking about like since Sinai, the amount of deaths that we're talking, or even prior to that, with all the people that Abraham brought along, right? Like, how in the world are we even going to fit all those people on the? Right. There's just like not a lot. It's got to be something about that that is poetic and sort of mystical in its explanation that does not really fit a practical view of like what we're presently dealing with so far as like our amount of space and ability to like hold humans and stuff, because like something about it is just very off.
Well, if the dead were revived, I'm just going to go with this thought for a minute. Julia, I do see your hand and I'll call on you in a second. If the dead were revived and it was a spiritual framework that we were thinking of, then the teachings of the dead would be revived. Maybe we would learn how to live with that knowledge toward a better end, or better future, I should say, for life going forward for the earth. Maybe their presence would be felt in the universe, and that would make a difference on how the world would be developed, conceptualized, thought of, how people would live. I just thought of that based on what you were saying. It inspired me to really think about that whole concept in a different way. For that, I thank you, because it doesn't make sense what we've got. It logically doesn't make sense. So it has to mean something more mystical, something on a deeper level. We need to look for the 4 levels, the drash and so forth. We need to look for the sod of that. We need to look and see where it is hidden. And if we were Kabbalists on the screen tonight, what would we come up with? Julia, you waited patiently for me to be done. Go ahead. Thank you for waiting.
No, I've talked too much anyway, but that's just kind of what I do. I think the Messiah, a single Messiah, is a very dangerous concept, very dangerous. I think personally we're in end times for Homo sapiens and a bunch of other species. And when we're in end times and we're experiencing, where I live, fires and smoke, drought, etc., it brings out the best and the worst in people. And it's a fascinating thing to watch, because you think it takes this kind of disaster to bring out this almost Messiah-like behavior. It also brings out the devil, but more so it brings out the Messiah. So I see this kind of apocalyptic time as we go down the tubes as a species, with these bringing out the best and bringing out the worst. There's going to be people who are sacrificing themselves for other people. There are going to be other people who are killing for a piece of bread. I know that's not very cheerful, but I mean, that's all.
So with that uplifting thought, we have another question, which is just a general, what do you think? What's your interpretation of this piece of text? What message can we take in these times as we go into this period in the year and in this place of turning turning inward, inward to the heart in order to turn outward. It's a time of turning in and turning out. And what do you take of this piece? Can you live with any piece of it? Can you bring any piece of it into your life going into the new year? How does it impact you? And you could hate it, it's okay. I mean, but I'm giving those who might have a positive spin on this an opportunity. Eddie, go ahead.
I think what Julia said in the beginning, that at least I look at it also like this, that God is in each one of us as the human being. And I think if we would look at all these 13 principles, and it will make us better people who will behave better toward the environment and toward each other, then it's a win-win situation, because it will encourage us to be better.
Thank you. Other thoughts on this prayer? I'm just curious what any takeaways would be from this prayer tonight for anybody. What will you take away from having studied this prayer tonight?
And one more thing, just the name of this poem, Igdal, it means growth. That if we will follow these principles, we will experience growth in ourselves, and maybe then we can look up.
Thank you, Eddie. That was a beautiful teaching. Thank you for that. Anyone else? Is there anything from this prayer that we've just spent the past hour studying that you can take away for yourselves going into the new year? Or was this prayer like just nothing that resonated with you? It's one of the cornerstone prayers of the Jewish faith. That's why I'm asking the question. Audrey, go ahead.
I feel I've spoken too much, but I have to say I loved it, and it is very meaningful for me, even though I don't necessarily agree with everything, especially the parts I bitched about.
The parts you don't agree with, yeah.
Yeah, except for the parts I don't agree with. But it makes me feel that this is the time, I always feel this way, I need to be the best person I can be. And I need to do my part in Tikkun Olam and repairing the world. And for the most part, I would accept all 13 and just say, well, I may not be so hot on some of these, but for me, it's important, and I like it. And Etty, thank you for telling me what Yigdal meant, because I never knew that. Thank you.
Other comments or reactions to what we did this evening? Anyone that we missed that would like to speak? Julia, is your old hand up, or is this a new comment?
This is yet another hand.
Yeah, go ahead. That's fine. It's all good.
For me, even though I have found reasons to disagree with every one of the 13, to me, the value is that we are having this discussion. We would not be having this discussion if Maimonides had not come up with this. And I think this is part of the Jewish tradition. So by looking at this, we're using our minds, we're using our spirits, and that in and of itself is healthy, don't you think?
Yeah, and something that you said makes me think, I'll offer a final comment on Yigdal, that I think Maimonides was no fool. And I think Maimonides was really sharp. And I think by putting these statements together, some of which are really controversial, some of them are like, they're okay, and maybe he put them together almost in an order where they went from simpler and easier to digest and accept to ones that now made you wrestle with yourself and wrestle with God, to the final one that was just like a really, I don't know. And so I think that the fact that we are engaged in this text, he died in 1204, and 2022, we are still wrestling with this text to see if we could live with this text today, or what parts of it we could live with today, or where our society is today. It speaks a great credit to Maimonides and to the work that Maimonides has left behind in his legacy. I mean, this is the man who brought us the Mishnah Torah, so to speak. And, and he is truly a scholar and a brilliant person, and knew the human body and the human workings through being a physician, and studied the stars as an astronomer, and studied human nature, and studied religion and ritual and all the faiths of the, the communities that he lived within and that surrounded him. I think Maimonides was brilliant in keeping us engaged to this day in what he wrestled with and what people wrestled with in his time. That's just my final thought. And, as we go into a step forward into the high holy days, I think that the wrestling that he gave us as a gift by studying his prayer tonight is a gift we take into the new year, and especially the Yamim Noraim, and those days where we struggle and wrestle, and we wonder whether we have to do two things. We have to turn our hearts outward and inward. And the key word is to turn them, because the heart carries all our pain, and we have to figure out how to go forward with that, what it's going to look like in the new year. So that's what I'd like to leave people with tonight, and to thank everybody for coming and wrestling with text with us.
Thank you.
Wait, we have one more comment.
Yes. Oh, go ahead, Eddie. Sorry.
I just want to say that I think the number 13 is not by chance, because in Judaism, if I think of bar mitzvah that turned the boy into a manhood, maybe these 13 principles can turn us to give us a transition in life to become more mature and more serious about what we think. That's all what I wanted to add.
Yes, because if Yigdal means growth, then we are at the gateway of growth, and that's I think that's a lovely thought to take away. So thank you, everybody, so very much for joining us tonight. Lishana Tova Umetuka to everybody. May it be a good year for everyone and your families and those you love. May it be a sweet year. And we look forward to seeing you very soon.